I started my career in wedding planning. It was the happier side of events, and unfortunately, while I was involved in that, several friends of mine passed away. Up until that point, I'd only lost grandparents or aunties and uncles who had passed away due to long illnesses. So I was in my 20s. I found myself suddenly dealing with the fact that I was not immortal, which when you're in your 20s, you have places to go, people to see. You have lists upon lists, all the countries you want to visit, careers you want to have. And all of a sudden, that could be taken away from me. And that was very hard for me to deal with at the time. I'm very much a glass half full kind of a girl. So I found myself sitting in these funerals, far too many at the time, dealing with my grief. A bit odd maybe, but I found myself in these funerals looking at them from an event point of view. That's where my brain goes just naturally. A funeral to most people wouldn't look like an event, but it is. It's very, very similar to a wedding, which most people might be aghast at me even considering that. Weddings are light, they're fun, they're happy occasions. Funerals are not. They're dark, they're heavy, they're sad, they're laden with tears. Although I've probably cried more at weddings than I have at some funerals. Logistically, they're the exact same. Unfortunately, whether it's a church or not, the focal point is a body versus two bodies, essentially, a couple. Yeah, so I found myself sort of looking at the funerals from that point of view. And one of the key things was not that there was anything wrong with those funerals. They were perfectly fine funerals. I just found myself thinking, and I tend to think about things a lot. And I found myself thinking, that's not what I want. I wanted to have my funeral not in a church. I wanted to have it in a venue that more represented me and that I would have more control over the content. I wanted more singing, more words, more celebration of my life as opposed to following a schedule of the funeral mass as we'd have it in Ireland. So I wrote a book in 2012 about funeral planning, planning a funeral in Ireland. There's 3 parts to it. 1, what to do when somebody dies. 2nd part, how to pre-plan your own. And a 3rd part, if you fill out the 3rd part, the appendices, you've created your own funeral plan. I very much wanted to do that to educate the people in Ireland on funeral planning, because I found there was an awful lot of information about the US and the UK on websites, online in general. There was very little in Ireland. I suppose in some ways the book for me became a personal research project, but I knew that the information that was within it would be really important to other people. About 12 years ago, I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived there for 2 years, and in my first year, I received a phone call at 9 a.m. My mother told me that my grandmother had been taken into hospital with panic attacks. Up to that date, I had lost my 3 other grandparents while I was very young, so I was very close to my grandmother. She went into hospital, and 12 hours later, I got a phone call. And I knew before I even picked up the phone that she had passed away. I was due home in Ireland 2 weeks later, and my grandmother had asked my mum when I was going to be home. And my mum said, oh, she'll be home in 2 weeks around Valentine's Day. And my grandmother just nodded, and she knew, she had accepted that she was going to pass away, and she knew she was sad and that she wouldn't see me. What was interesting about the experience for me was that 2 days later I was running the Miami Marathon, and I'd never run a marathon before in my life, nor will I do it again. But I ran it, and we started off in torrential downpour. It was insane. And we ran into scorching heat. So it was a pretty intense marathon as it was. But I will never forget, at the 18th mile, I hit a wall. Now, my grandmother's funeral service was taking place at this exact time, which was quite interesting. Another interesting part of it is that when I hit the wall, I was having a panic attack, which is what my grandmother actually went into hospital with. But I couldn't breathe. I was trying to run. I was trying to cry. I was trying to do everything. I couldn't. And my friend that was with me was panicking with me. I have to say, it really did show me how the human body can really just push on when it has to. But I will never forget crossing that finish line. It felt like I'd carried a boulder for the last hour of the run. Sadly, it started a couple of years of me losing people close to me, and started the roller coaster that was to become Jennifer Muldowney in the funeral industry. I never thought I would be sitting here and sort of working within this industry, but here you go. So I met Tony and Brian from ecoLegacy in, I think it was winter of 2012, when I was researching my book. I had a chapter that I wanted to do on alternative options. When I met with them and I found out what ecoLegacy stands for, why it exists, how it started, I just fell in love straight away. ecoLegacy is a way for us to leave the planet with a clean footprint. Not to say that we haven't existed, that we haven't been here, that it's an invisible footprint, but to leave a clean legacy that sort of says, I was here, I cared, I still care, but I'm gone now, and I want to pass on something good to my children. I don't have kids. I'm not married yet, hopefully, but I do want to have kids someday, and it would break my heart if I thought I couldn't leave them something good. ecoLegacy is, it's exactly the same as cremation. To put it in real clinical terms, the input and the output are pretty much the same, except there's no flame, there's no emissions, there's no chimney stack. What's fascinating is that I, myself, going through the ecolation unit, actually help to energize the energy my body emits throughout. Actually is recyclable and is used to keep the unit going, which I think is brilliant. Interesting question. So when I met Tony back in 2012 and I was doing some research for my book, I was interviewing him about ecoLegacy and about ecolation, and immediately after I said it to him at the end of the interview, but immediately after, I input in my own funeral plan that if it was available, I would get ecolated. If not, I would get cremated. Cremation was always, for me, my number one. I never wanted to be cold in the ground. I don't know why, I just have this image of being cold in the ground, even though I know I won't be there physically, but that was just, I don't like to be cold. With cremation, I felt like I could be scattered in Blessington Lakes, which is my favourite spot, and also I could be put into some jewellery if my family, friends and loved ones wanted to hold a piece of me dear. They might not want me hanging around their neck for life. But with ecoLegacy and ecolation, I immediately realised I could have all of that without damaging Blessington Lakes. By scattering some of me in Blessington Lakes, I was probably going to kill some fish. I didn't even know at the time. So now I know I'm not. I'm going to be good food for the fish, which is fine. But yeah, 100%. Back then I was sold on ecoLegacy and ecolation. And ecoLegacy, what it stood for, and ecolation, what it could do for the planet. So that's in my funeral plan. Hopefully not for any time soon, but it's there. What do I want to do before I kick the bucket? I really want to do Mexico, but that's on the plan this year, and hopefully I've got a few more years in the old dog yet. I would really like to have kids. Is that on my bucket list? Is that a bucket list thing? I don't know. Okay, I really want to do Mexico. I really want to go to Alaska. I'd love to do South America, is huge for me. I really want to travel a lot, actually. That's I've done a marathon, I've written a book. I'm happy enough to have them ticked off. I would love to own a bar, restaurant, nightclub. Maybe it's all three, I don't know, but I would love to own something like that. Possibly even deathly themed, I don't know. It seems to have followed me through life, so maybe it becomes the funeral, the life celebration venue of the future. I don't know. That needs a bit more thought. What else is on my bucket list? I would love my own TV show. And I never thought I would admit that. That has been a revelation of latter months. But I do think I'd have a very interesting TV show with all of the crazy things I like to talk about.